Hello, everyone, and welcome. We'll wait just a few minutes as the meeting is populated. I think if everybody could find their seats, we'll get started. So kind of the same thing here on the virtual platform. Okay. Well, hello again, everyone, and welcome to the 84th meeting of the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Review Committee. My name is Melanie O'Brien, and I am the designated federal official to the Review Committee. Before we begin, I would like to remind everyone that this meeting is being recorded. The recording, transcripts, and meeting minutes will be made publicly available after this meeting and will include the names of those in attendance at today's call. If you object to this, you may disconnect at this time. This is a public meeting of the Federal Advisory Committee established by the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, or NAGPRA, of 1990. And this meeting is held under the Federal Advisory Committee Act, or FACA, and its implementing regulations. This meeting was noticed in the Federal Register on November 28, 2022. An agenda for this meeting and materials are posted to the NAGPRA program events page. I'll put a link in the chat. The Secretary of the Interior issued a charter for this review committee, which governs its objectives and scope of activities. The purpose of the review committee is to monitor and review the inventory and identification process and repatriation activities under sections 5, 6, and 7 of the Act. The review committee is also responsible for reporting to Congress on the progress and any barriers encountered in carrying out its responsibilities. Currently, the review committee only has 6 appointed members. The charter for the review committee does not contain a quorum requirement, and a meeting may be held with fewer than 7 members present. As the designated federal official, I've determined that this meeting can proceed with only 6 members. With that as introduction, I'd like to start with the roll call of the committee members. Please answer out loud. Holly Aloha Ayau.
Here.
Dominique de Beaubien.
Here.
Angela Garcia Lewis.
Here.
Timothy McEwen.
Here.
Armand Menthorn.
Here.
Shelby Tisdale.
Here.
I would also like to acknowledge the individuals who are assisting me today in conducting this meeting. With me are 2 attorneys from the Department of the Interior Office of the Solicitor, Brady Blasco with the Division of Parks and Wildlife, and Stephen Simpson with the Division on Indian Affairs. From the National NAGPRA program, Lisa Koszalski is the review committee coordinator who is responsible for organizing this meeting and preparing the minutes and transcripts. I hereby call this meeting to order. At this time, Armand has agreed to offer a traditional opening for our meeting. Armand?
Oh, this morning as we begin, I had an elder, and she was my aunt, and she said many times, there's never a wrong time to pray, never a wrong time to do right, and never a wrong time to sing. And today, asking Creator, give us strength to do right, give us strength to pray. And as we go forward as a committee, we have to be mindful that accomplishments, goals can be very rewarding. And this is where it will take all of us, not only as a committee, but all the tribes, all the people that work with Park Service. And today we ask Creator to give all of us strong direction, perseverance, because there's no I in team. There's no I in team. But asking Creator today to watch over our family and our friends, and asking Creator today to make all of our hearts big in the work that needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Armand. Before we begin our first agenda item, I would like to note that the review committee is interested in receiving comment from anyone in attendance on the progress made and any barriers encountered in implementing NAGPRA. If you're interested in providing a public comment during this meeting, please let me know when I ask for public comment. At that time, I will turn on the chat feature for this meeting, or you can raise your hand to request a time to make public comment. You can also email your request to nagpra_info@nps.gov. I would also like to announce that today, the Department of the Interior extended the deadline for public comment on the proposed changes to the NAGPRA regulations. Comments must be received by 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday, January 31st, 2023. That is a 2-week extension from the previous deadline. The first item on the agenda today is the report to Congress for fiscal year 2022. At the last meeting on January 5th, Tim McEwen agreed to incorporate edits from the discussion and recirculate the draft report. The updated draft report to Congress was sent to the review committee members over the weekend, and a copy has been included in the meeting materials for this meeting. Before your discussion begins, and for the benefit of the new members on the committee, I'd like to briefly describe the process for the submission of your report to Congress. Following your approval of the report, the program staff will review the report for accuracy and make minor typographical or stylistic edits. The program will then send the report for review within the Department of the Interior. The department cannot make changes to the content of the report, but the report still must go through the departmental review process before it can be sent to Congress. Following the department's review, the report, along with a cover letter from the Secretary of the Interior, will be distributed to Congress. Past distribution of your report to Congress has included the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs, the House Subcommittee for Indigenous Peoples of the United States, the Native American Caucus, as well as leadership of the National Park Service and the Department of the Interior. In addition, we have sent your report in past years to review committee members, past review committee members. If you would like additional members of Congress to receive the report, you can let me know at this time or after this meeting. One more quick note. The draft report to Congress contains suggested edits to the National NAGPRA Program statistics that were appended to the report. The National NAGPRA Program report, from which those pages were taken, was finalized in October of 2022. At this time, I don't want to make the requested edits to a previously published document. However, I have noted the review committee's suggestions and will consider them for the next annual report. A link to program reports can be found on our website, and I'll post that in the chat. At this time, I'll turn the discussion of the report to Congress over to the review committee.
Hello and good morning, committee members. I wanted to start off, of course, welcoming everyone to our second public meeting, but to also thank Dr. Timothy McEwen for all of his hard work in compiling our comments, our edits to the fiscal year 2022 report to Congress, especially given the short time frame he had from the last meeting by which to review our edits. And hopefully we got it to him on time and it didn't cause him too much concern over the weekend. But thank you, Tim, and everyone on the committee who had a hand in submitting their comments for this report. For purposes of today's discussion, I would like to ask Tim if he would lead the discussion and highlight any sections that you believe that we may want to discuss. So Tim, if you would.
Thanks. I just want to thank all the members who sent me comments over the weekend as well. So that I was hopefully able to incorporate what you had sent me. If we could just go through the document and I'll point out where I made changes from what we had last time. And thank you to Lisa for figuring out how to put the page numbers on because I couldn't do it. So thanks. On page 1, the executive summary, the first numbered paragraph there, which outlines particular definitions or other items for amendment in the statute. I amended that or revised that to incorporate the suggestions that had been put forward the week before. So I renumbered them, but I put them all in that section. Shelby caught a numerical change that, thank you on that I had misnumbered something. On page 8, the first paragraph, there was another sentence at the end of that paragraph that characterized some interaction that we had regarding jurisdiction. Dominique had suggested we just delete that and the reference to asterisks on some of them. So I took that all out. On page 18, again, there was a characterization there of some interaction we had on jurisdiction that Dominique had recommended some different language to that, which I have incorporated here. Generalize that a little bit more. And then actually, let's just circle back on page 8. All of those definitions, I had moved those and kind of reorganized them so that they're the definitions in particular are in the order that the particular definition appears in the statute. I think that's it.
Are there any other comments from the members?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
motion to approve.
There's a motion to approve the draft annual report to Congress for fiscal year 2022. Is there a second? I'm sorry.
Yes, second.
That's Angela. Mahalo. Discussion.
Question.
Yes, Simon.
Oh, calling the question
Oh,
on the
all in,
motion.
yes, all in favor of adopting the report? Yeah, probably
Aye.
best since it's virtual. Raise your hand and voice, please.
Well, I can
Aye.
give you a call if you'd like.
Aye.
Okay, that'll be better.
Okay, you can respond with yes or no on the question. And again, the question is to approve the report to Congress as drafted. I will go with the order that's on my screen if that's okay, so I don't lose track. Armand Minthorn,
Yes.
Dominique de Beaubien,
Yes.
Holly Aloha Ayau,
Yes.
Shelby Tisdale,
Yes.
Timothy McEwen,
Yes.
Angela Garcia Lewis.
Yes.
So the motion passes with all in agreement.
And can I make a motion as well? I would like to propose that we authorize the chair of the committee to make such changes in terms of typographical errors or formatting that may be necessary to move it along.
We in the program are happy to take that responsibility, and we will of course share with the committee as a whole any edits that we make.
That's
And
fine.
unless there's an issue with the program carrying that out on behalf of the committee.
No, it sounds like you just want to make sure that there's no delay in the review. Is that correct, Tim?
Yeah, that was sort of my thing, that if there's one person that's kind of authorized to say, yes, this is not a substantive change, proceed, it doesn't have to come to all of us.
Oh, so in that regard, is there a second to his motion?
Second.
Again, I'll just say we would not make any substantive changes if we will share with the committee as a whole any edits that we do make.
Yeah. Well, let's just discuss it, and then if we don't need to proceed with it, then the motion can die. But I think it's important for the record to reflect that we just want to make sure that there is a smooth process without delay of the department's review of the report for minor editing, wordsmithing, and that sort of thing. And that there's no delay in the submission of the report, which I think is the real issue here to Congress. If the members are comfortable with us just being able to acknowledge that on the record and without a motion, I'm fine too. I just thought it was important that the comments be made.
And with that, I'll withdraw my motion.
That sounds good. So are we, Melanie, are we good with agenda item 1?
If I might, I think in the past, there has been some considerable delay between when we have approved a report and when it was actually sent, which has drawn on to many months. Can we get a commitment on or an agreement on what we as a committee consider to be a reasonable amount of time for the Park Service and the department to do a review and get the report?
Melanie, can you give us some insight into, so you described the process, the internal review process. Could you give us an idea of a time frame and how long that would take? Because we recognize governments move at glacial speed.
Certainly, I did an analysis for the committee last year of the time that it's taken for these reports to go through the departmental review process. It varies greatly over time. It is generally at least 3 months, but in some cases has extended beyond that period.
That's interesting. I had the number 3 months in my head. Can we, at this point, agree that in 3 months' time, the department will check in with us to advise us on where the review process is at, whether it's near completion or what timing that would be? Because I think 3 months would be a reasonable amount of time. Members?
I find that reasonable.
I mean, reflecting back on previous reports to Congress that were done in the 90s and early 2000s, I actually think 3 months is a very long time, given that this is our report and we've just approved it. This is just doing the cover letters and getting it sent.
I'm looking to Armin and Shelby, being veterans of the committee, if they could weigh in on this as well.
I will defer to you, Armand. You've been on this committee a very long time and have a lot of experience. I came on during COVID, and COVID seemed to have an impact on so much of our work and what had been done previously in terms of trying to get our reports to Congress submitted and so on. But Armin, I think you might have a better sense of kind of the timing on these reports in the past.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
and thank you, Shelby. You know, all of the tribes that are listening in here today are familiar with what the committee has done in the past. And past committees and the report to Congress have been a very useful tool. And mainly the education of the report, but also submission of the report can, and the committee has used the opportunity to invite people in Congress to meetings. And of course, I believe only one, Melanie, where congressional people or staffers attended a review committee meeting. But that's the opportunity that the committee has. And again, Shelby, the sooner that this report is submitted, the better. And knowing that, you know, what goes on TV, the news, and everything that's going on with Congress, the dust will settle. But when the dust settles, then ideally work will resume. And when it does resume, they'll have that report. And this is when the committee as a whole can make those introductions and those invitations. And it can't be emphasized enough. Education goes a very long way. And this report is a big tool for the committee. So thank you.
Yes, Tim.
Can I suggest that we request from the designated federal officer and from the department that they do everything in their power to ensure that this report is delivered to Congress in 30 days from today?
Comments? Does anyone see third? I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, Armin.
So Melanie, you know, if there's a way that the committee can help streamline this report, let us know. We can help your office or your officers. But if there's a means, whether it be 30 days or what have you, Melanie, the sooner that this report is submitted, the better. And it establishes a big foothold for the committee and the purpose of the NAGPRA program and the purpose of the committee. So Melanie, again, if there's any help the committee can do, please let us know. Thank you, Melanie.
Does anyone see the 30 days as unreasonable or any, you know, I mean, because the reason I ask is the more I'm thinking about it, if the review is simply for, wordsmithing and that sort of thing, I would like to support 30-day turnaround period, unless Melanie, you think it's absolutely critical that there be more time, that we ask for 30 days and then we check in on by February 10th. At least I could with Melanie to find out where things are at and hopefully, I think the point is being made very clear by the committee that we wish to see the report get to Congress as soon as possible. Are there any other comments?
Just so.
I had a couple of suggestions in terms of distribution. I think it's a little unclear who is on some of the committees over in Congress. And I know Melanie had outlined the committees that we generally have sent things to. But I might recommend a couple of names, several names in particular to include that may be included on one of the committees, but I just don't know. For the House side, I would recommend Representative Tom Cole, Sharice Davids, Mary Patola, and Joss Bechin. All of them are enrolled tribal members. And on the Senate side, I would recommend Senator Mark Wayne Mullen, who's an enrolled tribal member.
Thank you, Tim. Was someone else about to comment? Oh, I heard a voice. That was you, Melanie. Please.
Sure. So two things. First of all, we will move as quickly as possible with the typographical edits. That is the process the program is committed to do, and we will do so. This week's a little tough for me, but we will try to have that done by next week and have that sent off to the department. Beyond that, that is the limit of my control on your report to Congress is submission to the department. Even if you were to check in with me in 30 days, I will likely not be able to tell you anything more than it's under review. I generally don't get any more information than that. I will, and I have in the past and will continue to ask to inquire about where it is in a process. But in the past, I've never been given an answer to that question. So I just want to set some expectations about what you're asking of the department and what is likely to come out of it. I will say that Tim raises a good point, which is one of the issues we have and one reason why this can take some time, especially this time of the year in this congressional cycle. The committees are not always established. So sometimes we have to wait until the membership of those committees is established in Congress, especially at the beginning of a new Congress, before we know who to even address the letters to. So that is work that the Congressional Liaison Office will do for us. And they have access to information that maybe not even is public yet, but there tend to be times where they can't even complete the address process for these letters. So I just wanted everybody to be aware. We'll move the process forward as quickly as possible, but there's some things that are beyond our control here.
So may I request a clarification? So the report clearly is the committee's report. At what point does draft become final? Was it when we voted, or was it? Okay, so the report is considered final.
Yes, other than we will go through it with a fine-tooth comb to be sure that all the periods are in the right place and there's no accidental typos.
Okay, so with regard to our, I guess for lack of a better term, individual use of the report, we can refer to the report now as final.
Yes.
Okay, so we can provide it to our Senate senators from Hawaii. Or should we wait because he's also the chair of the Indian Affairs Committee?
Well, I mean, we will be sending an official copy to the chair of the Senate Indian Affairs Committee,
Okay.
along with the cover letter from the secretary. It will go, and that copy will ultimately be a part of the congressional record. I think at this point on the House side, we still have to send a paper copy for it to be an official record.
Okay.
So we have various protocols, but they won't accept a copy that you might send as the department's communication. It will have to wait for that to go through our process.
I was more interested in the discussions making our congressional delegation aware that the committee took the action today to finalize the report, and that the final version is on its way, but the substance of it is here, is been approved.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Yes, Simon.
Melanie, listening to the discussion, this is a suggestion. Like with every report that goes to Congress, there's a cover letter, and all cover letters are generally the same, thanking them, blah blah blah. The suggestion would be to reword that cover letter so that this final report can get some traction, so that Congress will take a look at it sooner rather than later. So this is a suggestion that to reword the cover letter. So thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Any other comments? I don't want to belabor this anymore because we have a lot of work to do on the proposed regs. But I think the committee is making very clear its perspective that the report be reviewed as expeditiously as possible, and that it is our understanding that pursuant to our vote, it is considered final. Any further discussion? Are we good? All right. Having heard that, Melanie, can we segue into item 2?
Certainly, the next item on your agenda is a discussion of the proposed regulation. By means of an introduction, on October 18th, 2022, the department formally proposed to revise regulations to improve implementation of NAGPRA. The department is seeking public comment on the proposed rule through January 31st, 2023. Again, that is a change as of today, that the deadline for public comment is January 31st. Information on submitting comments, as well as links to several documents that may assist with the review of the proposed rule, are available on the regulations page of the NAGPRA website, and I will add that to the chat. In addition to public comment, the department is specifically seeking the review committee's recommendations regarding the proposed rule. The review committee has time today to finalize its recommendations. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I will lean on my colleague one more time, Timothy McEwen, who took on the Herculean effort to compile all of our comments. How many pages is it now? 25. With our edits from last week's meeting, compiled into a document, and thank you, Lisa and staff for making sure that we all got that. I would ask Tim if he could lead the discussion as you did so eloquently last week.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I would propose we just go page by page like we did last time.
Hold on, before you start, anyone had any comments up front before we dive into the weeds? All right, last warning. Here we go. Thank you, Tim. Go ahead.
Okay, as you will recall, we had a draft at the last meeting that we went through. There were a number of changes that we talked about at the meeting. After the meeting, a number of people have sent additional changes. In order to generate this one, I accepted all changes that were proposed, so this one is a relatively clean version, with the exception of one overstrike that I missed on the first page. Sorry about that. So if we could just go page by page, and if there's any of the sections there that you have concerns about or want to tweak a little bit, just let me know. We can do that. Then on page 1, the bottom of the first paragraph, there's an overstrike shown of the phrase, especially in subpart C, which I will remove.
I'm sorry, Tim, where are you?
On page 1, the bottom of the first paragraph,
Oh, I see it.
and I just missed it, sorry. Any changes with the first page?
Nope.
Hearing none. Page 2. Hearing none. Page 3.
Just a
Oh.
minor edit. The bracket under 10.2 ahupua at the very end, the open bracket needs to be deleted.
Thank you.
Just minor.
And just as a reminder, as you're going through and there are no comments, then that is assumed to be an agreement of each member.
Oh, yes, sorry.
To the
Thank you for
language
that.
in the report.
Thank you for pointing that out, Melanie. So that we're all clear, yeah, that when we're not commenting on it, on any of these issues on per page, that is our way of saying that we are in agreement with it. So, which means if you're not, you have to speak up. All right, thank you, Melanie. Sorry, go ahead, Tim.
That was page 3. On to page 4. Hearing none. Page 5.
I have a question. When we added additional text to include digital data, what is the scope of our meeting there?
Sorry, where are you, Dominique?
On page 5, under the text that we added for casts and 3D scans.
Okay.
So I think my intent was a pretty comprehensive meaning of digital data. And I just want to make sure that we're in agreement that that statement as written is as comprehensive, I think, as we intend.
Would you like to propose an elaboration?
I think I definitely can. I just want to be very certain that we're not saying that digital data only applies to the 3D scans. I want to make sure that all the digital data applies to the human remains in general. Does that make sense?
Yes, and it's a point well taken. Thank you. How would we handle that, Tim?
Just as a suggestion, could we say, and this is the 1, 2, 3, 4th paragraph down, the one that's all in red, 1, 2, 3, 4, the 4th line down. in that paragraph, where it says any replicas from 3D scans. Could we say, and other digital data? Would that make it broad enough? Would that encompass what you are concerned about, Dominique?
I would say other, or maybe even use of all digital data.
All other, yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry, it seems like the limitation is actually in the first sentence where it says casts and 3D scans of Native American human remains means as part of its inventory process, otherwise required by NAGPRA. Sorry, this is a very long sentence. I think that putting it at the end of that sentence is not where the emphasis needs to be. It's at the very beginning. That when
Yeah, you're thinking front end, yeah.
you don't just mean casts and 3D scans.
Maybe we need more of a comprehensive list. So casts, 3D scans, digital data, and that could be upfront at the beginning of that paragraph. So it's less limiting.
And this is, you're suggesting this is a defined term, casts, 3D scans? Is additional definition, is what I'm reading here?
It's an addition to the definition of human remains, correct?
Yes, it's under that section.
So what I have is casts, comma, strikeout and 3D scans, comma, and all other digital data of Native American human remains. Is that what you're thinking, Dominique?
I think that may work.
How can we word that to include all technology, or any technology that may come forward that is used to visually duplicate ancestral remains?
I guess that would be a way of asking is all other digital data comprehensive enough?
Does that prohibit them from making additional, if it only mentions casts specifically, then I imagine that we'll get a lot of questions to the tribes asking if they can do X, Y, and Z types of scans.
That, in my mind, that would be covered by the phrase all other digital data. What I was trying to do here was just recognize that there's this practice going on that may or may not be shared during consultation, because it wasn't shared with us, in which we found out post repatriation. So yeah, the intent here is to flag this as another area that needs to be addressed. And the rule says that it should, no such cast replicas or digital data scanned from Native human remains, fingernail objects, shall be offered for sale or exchange without consent. So I think that's the real critical language here, is that we're trying to clarify that the expectation that this is an issue that must be consulted if it's happening, so that the tribe or Native Hawaiian organization has full awareness and they don't get caught off guard by seeing it for sale online. But as to Angela's concern, I'm not sure what other technologies are out there that, because I think what you're referring to is really a consultation issue, where all matters affecting human remains should be put on the table. So getting back to this this language, are we okay with adding and all other digital data at the front end, and leaving all other digital data at the back end of this very long sentence. Are we good?
I'm good.
All right, back to you, Tim.
Just in terms of writing it down, casts, comma, 3D scans, comma, and all other digital data of Native American human remains means as part of its inventory process otherwise required by NAGPRA, all federally funded museums and agencies shall include reference to all casts created from actual Native American human skeletal remains and any replicas from 3D scans and all other digital data of Native Americans, period. Is that correct? Okay.
I like that.
Anything else on page 5?
I wanted to raise a missing part of this discussion. I know, Angela, you had raised some other concerns about the definition of human remains and a broadening of that at the last meeting, and I didn't know that I didn't see that reflected here.
Right, that was one of the questions that I asked, was about adding formally interred animal burials to that, because we cannot, traditionally we can't call them objects because it would be the same type of objectification. We have a hard time repatriating in that sense.
I think I understand what you're trying to say. Is there like language that you think would be like clear enough to put in?
I would like to include formally interred animal burials that are imbued with the same spirit as human beings.
This is Tim, kind of hearkening back to the 90s and 2000s. I am aware that there are some repatriations of buried animal remains that were intentionally placed with or near human remains as part of the death rite of a ceremony of a people that fell under the category of funerary object.
I'm actually speaking of animal burials that were formally interred on their own without associated human remains. So these would be like, say, the bald and golden eagles that were formally interred in places that also have funerary objects for their burials. So they're interred in the same way that human remains are interred. So they are in their own category. They're not objects in any way, and we don't repatriate them as objects because it would be sacrilegious, I guess, to refer to them in that manner or to repatriate them under that definition, because then it is memorialized in the paperwork.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Simon.
Tim, Angela, maybe to add, and again, Angela, this is from experience. you know, the repatriations that we've done in the past, and this is where consultation is key. The consultation helps determine and strengthen a determination. And past repatriations that we've done here in the Northwest, tribes determined associated funerary objects because they're associated, they're sacred, period, end of discussion. Human remains, ancestral remains are sacred, period, end of discussion. And this is where the consultation is very crucial, very important with tribes, whether they're museums, universities, federal agencies, and unassociated funerary objects as well. So the word sacred is very powerful. And it's not for a federal agency or anybody else to try to interpret that. Us as tribes know what sacred is. And the word sacred is very powerful. So just to put that out. Thank you.
I think the challenge we're facing here is we are appending to the definition of human remains. Largely, NAGPRA is, you know, I mean, the thinking is linear and based on the physical. So I can see folks having a hard time with imbuing non-human remains with human qualities. I'm just trying to think what, where would, because correct me if I'm wrong, Angela, but I mean, you're saying they're not there to be, even though they're not human, they're being treated as such. With
Yes.
imbuing them with the same, what we call mana, same as spiritual essence. That's trickier. I'm sure Brady and Steven are sitting up right now in their seats trying to I don't know, that's what I'm what's coursing through my head is how do we recognize that, but within the context that we are actually amending the definition of human remains.
Well, Mr.
I'm
Chairman,
trying to think of maybe including ancestral remains. Excuse me, Armin. I need to interrupt. Go ahead, Armin.
yeah, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
when you amend something, you change. And ancestral remains for us as tribes and for Department of Interior people. Again, amending is changing something. What a consideration is not to amend ancestral, but to strengthen it by adding instead of amending. We shouldn't take away anything when amendments are made. And strengthening is what we need to do. And again, Mr. Chairman, the one word, sacred, we can use that word. Thank you.
Thank you, Armin. Is it possible that, Angela, you could craft language to be included as a contextual comment to this proposed language so that it is included in our proposed comments that certain tribes imbue, human essence to animal and non-human remains. My only concern is NAGPRA has specific categories, and that much is clear. And we're essentially talking about imbuing human remains with language that kind of crosses over into funerary objects or perhaps sacred objects. And how do we do so and still recognize the integrity, if you will, of these separate NAGPRA categories? And I think one useful way that could be handled is in an explanatory comment to this section that makes clear that we are recognizing that perspective that some tribes have of human essence imbued in non-human remains, and the recognition that those should be treated as such. Beyond that, I'm not sure. I'm struggling on how you would actually include language in human remains to reference non-human remains.
Yes, that has been our issue for quite a while, is how do we do that? How do you take the sacred traditional perspective and fit it to a non-Indigenous framework of legal definitions when we define human beings and sentient creatures through their spirit rather than through their, what you see as a particular species or, that sort of thing. Because we don't, in the legal sense, we don't recognize the spirituality of anything else outside of, human beings and how they interact with one another, rather than in traditional culture where we interact with the landscape and the creatures that were here before us have greater primacy to that particular spirit. So it's difficult to encompass that. And we've been held up because we can't call them objects. So that's where that comes from, is because we cannot call them objects and maintain integrity to our traditional culture. So I will write something to that effect and get it back to you, or to Tim, or no, to you, I'm sorry.
Right, but we want to be able to get through this and approve it by the end of our discussion. So if you could work on that, and then we can circle back to it. But before we do that, I don't know, I saw Melanie's Hannah.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a couple of points of clarification here. Thank you, Angela, for expressing again that concept here. I did want to be sure that it was recognized in this draft if the full committee felt that it should be. I wanted to clarify that human remains as a category is not defined in the Act itself. It is a creation of these regulations. I would also point out that the human part of that human remains is a biological species designation, not necessarily a spiritual designation. And there may be a way of incorporating incorporating other kinds of remains into what is human remains. I think the problem for us is when you say human remains and non-human remains, that's a distinction, but NAGPRA talks about human remains. So what does human remains mean? In the current regulations, it's defined to be the physical remains of the body of a Native American individual. So again, I think if there was a way that you could, Angela, describe how the kinds of individuals that you're talking about may not meet the biological definition of human, but still fit the definition of human remains. It might be a way of explaining this in a way that would fit within the legal regulatory language, if that makes any sense.
That was an excellent clarification. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Simon?
just one last comment. We have about probably 71, 72 that are listening in or viewing this meeting. I would ask them to help us here.
Excellent.
A lot of those, many of the participants have feet on the ground. They do this work every day. So I would ask the participants to help us here. Send comments, questions, whatever they may be, either to the committee or Melanie or Lisa. So we can get through this. And the comment, Mr. Chairman, is, what Angela was citing earlier, our traditions and our customs and even our religion. We don't need to go there. People, whether they're museums or universities or federal agencies, they're still having an effort grasping and working with NAGPRA. And we don't need to complicate that with trying to interpret what we know. And for us as Indian people, what we know and what we carry every day in our lifestyle, that's for us. And to try to have some sense in the NAGPRA law of that, it makes a lot more confusion for museums, universities, and federal agencies. They're having a time now with what is sacred. We know what sacred is. We deal with it in our culture, in our heritage. We deal with that. We know what it is. So, that is the comment. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to ask Lisa, if in the comments, if you could type out the definition of the current definition of human remains that Melanie read, so that we could see it in the comment. Yes, Angela. Oh, you gotta unmute. You gotta unmute, Angela.
I thought I was unmuted already, sorry. What I wrote was human remains as well as those individual burials that are spiritually imbued with the same character as human beings and have been formally interred.
Could you write that in the chat, Angela?
Yeah. Oh,
I
thank you,
did not,
Melanie.
but I will.
Yes, Angela, I'd appreciate if you wrote it because I wanted to be clear whether you were saying formally as in formal or formerly as in previously.
Formal, meaning that it's a formal funeral.
Interim.
And
Right.
yeah, exactly.
I have another suggestion, just to throw it out there. If we were to add the word spiritual, so human remains means the physical remains, physical or spiritual remains of the body of a Native American individual. So I think maybe if the word spiritual were added to the definition, what the hope would be is that in consultation, and Angela, please say if this would meet that burden, you would be able to say, this is, these are the spiritual remains of a Native American person. Does that transfer correctly?
I don't think so, because the spirit of those creatures existed prior to. So they would be ancestral spirits to Native Americans. But I see what you mean, and it is it does make sense. Let me finish typing this into the box here.
While Angela does that, let me just say that currently the comments are disabled until we get to public comment. If the committee would like to pause for public comment at some point during your review of the regulations to get the kind of feedback that Armand was suggesting, we can certainly do that. But I do want to try to at least, we had a lot of comments coming in and we weren't always getting them on the record. So I wanted to have a discrete time in which those public comments were made. So, Mr. Chair, I'll let you tell me when you would like to do that. I'll also add that I received a request that we screen share the document that you're reviewing, which I would be happy to do for you.
Yes, yeah, please do so. Committee, I think we would be wise to follow Armin's suggestion and ask that public comment be allowed in the chat now so that we can kind of hone in on what we want to do here. So that we can get this right, number one, but two, get on to the rest of the 25 pages. Is everyone okay with that?
I agree.
Yes. Tim?
Mr. Chairman,
Oh, yes, Armin.
Melanie, one last question. The statute as it is now, does it have the word sacred in it?
In the kind of object that is a sacred object, yes, that is where the word sacred appears.
So the word sacred isn't included with human remains.
There is no definition of human remains in the Act. There is only a definition of human remains in the regulations, and the word sacred does not appear.
Well, Mr. Chairman, again, if that word can be included with objects, it needs to be included with ancestral remains, that word. So that's all.
Thank you, Armin.
Spiritual remains.
Yeah, we're asking the community if they could type in their comments into the chat.
We have a request for a oral comment from Raylan Williams of the Gila River Indian community. Mr. Chair, would that be okay?
That is fine with me.
Mhm.
Everyone good with that? Yes, please.
Yes.
Hey, Raylan, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Good afternoon, NAGPRA Review Committee members. Thank you, Chair, for this opportunity to comment on the discussion at present. My name is Raylan Williams. I'm the Cultural Resource Specialist for the Gila River Indian Community Tribal Historic Preservation Office. And I just want to provide support Angela's comment regarding the internment of animal burials. If you are unaware, the state of Arizona has Arizona revised statutes regarding the regarding human remains, and for project-specific burial discoveries, Arizona State Museum has created what they call an Arizona Burial Discovery Agreement. And in the agreement, the Gila River Indian Community and Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian Community have included in their agreements that animal burials are certain types of animal burials that represent the deliberate internment of animals that are imbued with the same spirit as human remains and funerary objects, and therefore they require the same treatment as human remains. Such animal burials include, but are not limited to, bald eagles, golden eagles, hawks, and other raptors, macaws, red-winged blackbirds, and dogs. And it's important to us because we view animal burials differently. And in the archaeological record, it has been known that specific animals have been found in archaeological sites buried in such a manner that we consider very important to us, to our people and the community. And so we want to show them the same respect that our ancestors have shown them when they interred these specific animals. And we want to ensure that the respect and treatment that we give to our ancestors are the same to the animals that have been encountered. Thank you.
Mahalo. Thank you, Raylan. Are there any other, oh, I'm sorry, Tim, go ahead.
If there's more comments, I'll defer. I was going to make an attempt to incorporate what Angela said, but if there's more comments, we should listen to that first.
Yes, Melanie, are there additional comments or folks who wanted to address the committee?
I do not see any at this time. Again, if you would like to address the committee, you can raise your hand using the reactions feature, or you can type a comment. we have a comment in the chat from Jackie Reisner with the Wisconsin Historical Society. I agree with Angela. I have seen a previous instance where an intentional animal burial, e.g. burials of dogs, had been repatriated under the category sacred item, but these remains don't seem to fit this category, especially with institutions that are either A, resistant to repatriation, or B, only repatriate following the distinct requirements of NAGPRA. It would be very helpful to have a category that specifically names these animal remains as protected category under NAGPRA.
Thank you, Jackie. I took a stab at trying to take what Angela had written and include it in the primary definition of human remains in the chat. I don't know, did I do that right in the chat, Melanie?
I don't see it.
Hold on. It says hosts and panelists, no? Oh, there.
Here it is.
And then click return. Angela, what do you think? You got to unmute.
Yes, I think that fits. I'm fine with that. Just as long as they're not, that comment about the museums and institutions sticking straight to the definition is what prohibits us from repatriating under the law. So that would be helpful to us to move forward with some of our repatriations. So I think that would be helpful to all of the tribes that have the same issues.
So Melanie, the chat is considered part of the record, correct?
Yes, it is, although it is only, excuse me, it is only placed in the transcript if it is read aloud. Also, the chat is not available in the recorded version of this meeting.
Members, anybody else has comments on the proposed definition? I just took what the existing definition and Angela's definition and just combined them. This is pretty significant. Just want to point out this is history making, if you will, to recognize this important point and expand this definition.
Mr. Chair, could I share what you put in the chat with everyone?
Yes, please.
I will also read it for the record if that's okay.
Please. Oh, wait, before you do that, Dominic, did you want to say something before we do that?
Oh, I just had a question.
Okay.
And that's on the 2 words of formally interred. And my concern is that it may create a loophole somewhere if the burial itself is still interred. and it's not yet excavated and you want to provide it protections under NAGPRA.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Sure. So my question is about the two words in the definitions, formally interred. So does that create a loophole if the burial has not yet been excavated? So let's say it's found somewhere and it's still in the ground. Does the definition still apply because it's still interred? You know, we want those full protections under the law. So the way that I would read it, and if, you know, I was being skeptical, I could say, this only applies to collection burials. Whereas you might want those protections to apply on burials that may not yet have been excavated, and you may want to keep them protected.
So if say a museum is in possession of these remains, these animal remains, and the tribe says we consider these human remains under this definition. I include formally interred to make the distinction. The formality is what imbues the remains with human quality. Versus if you just find these remains randomly. That was the distinction I was trying to make, that there is this connection going on between the humans and the animals, and not.
I get it. I was completely interpreting that word incorrectly. And so I'm with you now.
Okay.
I was reading it as like previously interred, as in they're already like excavated.
No.
Okay.
No.
I'm with
Yeah.
you. You're good.
Thanks. Okay, Angela. Oh, I'm sorry, Tim.
I just looked up interred so that we're all in the same place. Interred, past participle, to place, in parentheses, a corpse, close parentheses, in a grave or tomb, typically with funerary rites. So if the animal remains were interred with funerary rites and were imbued with this human concept, I think that would apply regardless of whether they've been re-excavated or not.
Right. Excellent. Angela? You gotta unmute.
I agree with that. That's what we want to convey, that those burials have been formally recognized as, you know, spiritually special beings, and that is why they have been given the same funerary rites, and they have their own funerary objects and offerings. So I agree with the wording.
Thank you. Melanie, could you read Andrea Bridges' comment into the record, please?
Certainly. Before I do so, though, I wanted to wrap up this comment and be sure that someone is adding this Holly Aloha's suggested language into the document.
Okay.
Okay.
I am.
Okay. So we had another comment in the chat. Will the definition of human remains be expanded at some point to include DNA samples that were taken from individuals or digital genome sequences that were created using these DNA samples? Or is it to be presumed that the language already captures these categories or DNA and genome sequences?
Wow. That is thought-provoking. Thank you, Andrea. Ooh.
I can tell you what our advice of the NAGPRA program is when we're asked this question by museums and tribes for that matter. Where these kinds of items, aDNA samples or digital genome sequences, I'm less familiar with, but other kinds of DNA samples, if they are physical remains of a Native American individual, they meet that definition of human remains. We have certainly had examples of the repatriation of I'm gonna misconstrue what it was, but I want to say it was residue from DNA samples. And those have been repatriated under NAGPRA's human remains. So we certainly have examples of similar kinds of human remains that are repatriated under that physical remains definition. In terms of the digital genome sequence, this might get to the other digital data part of the
I was
discussion.
going to say, yes. Members, discussion? I think this is something we should address.
I agree. While we haven't struggled with the repatriation of, like Melanie mentions, the residue, I think it is highly dependent on who you're working with.
Mhm.
So I think it would be advantageous to have it spelled out that it is included.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Angela.
I agree with that because when tribes are making claims for repatriation, if the definition isn't explicit, then there's a tendency to say that it's not in the regulations, it's not in the law, we can't do that. So to include it would be helpful so that it isn't restricted based on language. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Shelby.
I find this discussion really interesting because just from the museum perspective, I would assume that a lot of museum professionals are not considering animal burials found in an archaeological context to be associated with human remains. And I think this discussion has been extremely helpful. And I agree with Angela. I think something needs to be spelled out in the regulations. So it's very clear that that this is a concern. These are considered to be spiritual beings, and we know from an archaeological perspective that they are intentionally buried. So so I think this would actually give the law a little more teeth, I think, in terms of considering animal burials. So I'm in full support of adding this to our comments.
Thank you, Shelby. Tim?
I think we're going in two different directions, so I just want to kind of make sure which path we're on. There's one suggestion that we've had about adding the formally interned animal burial spiritually imbued with the character of Native Americans. And then there's a second one that we're also now starting to talk about DNA and digital DNA sequencing and whether we need to be more explicit about that, about what's covered.
Yes.
If we want to go down that path, could I ask one of the attorneys, because I've got too many screens open right now, if they can go to the 95 version of the regulations in the preamble. I believe there's some text that describes the range that was at least intended then. And we can play with that language a little bit.
You mean on the definition of human remain?
Yeah, it's in the preamble.
Yes, I was actually just looking at that, so let me try
'Cause
to.
I seem to remember there was a discussion of hair and all kinds of other things that would be included.
Well, actually, this gets to the discussion in the 95 preamble relates to the sentence that the review committee is recommending be stricken, which is the freely given and naturally shed sentence.
Yes.
That is what the preamble discusses. But let me find the exact language for you.
Because I also remember back then, there was a big discussion, this committee had a big discussion about coprolites.
The preamble to the 1995 final rule says 3 commenters recommended excluding disarticulated and unassociated human remains such as isolated teeth and finger bones from repatriation. 2 commenters recommended amending the definition to include only those human remains associated with the body at the time of death to eliminate such things as extracted or lost teeth, cut fingernails, coprolites, blood residue, and tissue samples taken by coroners. 1 commenter recommended deleting the exemplary clause, including but not limited to bones, teeth, hair, ashes, or mummified or otherwise soft tissue, as being over limiting. The act makes no distinction between fully articulated burials and isolated bones and teeth. Additional text has been added excluding naturally shed human remains from consideration under the act. This exclusion does not include any human remains for which there is evidence of purposeful disposal or deposition. The exemplary clause has been deleted.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Armin.
yeah, Melanie, in listening, only heard the word determine once, but just to suggest adding with that word determine in consultation. Thank you.
What was the?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Armin.
can we take a break?
Oh, yes. We're almost halfway in, we're almost to the halfway mark. Everyone, can we take a 10-minute break? 10 minutes, good? Yeah. And Melanie, official time to be back would be, I don't know where you guys are at here. It's 10:34 in the morning. So 10:45, 3:45, I think, is it, you guys?
That's correct. It's easiest to say we'll come back at a 1/4 till.
Okay. And if you could post the time so that everyone can see,
Yes, I
I'd
will.
appreciate it.
Mhm.
Thank you.
We on break, Melanie?
Yes, we are for 10 minutes.
I'm gonna go find a maple bar.
Hey, if you could please turn your cameras back on, we'll get started in 20 seconds. Hey, we're ready to get started again. Mr. Chair,
Yes, if we could continue on. I took a stab at a rewording the section that we are initially discussing based on a comment of Andrea Bridges. Melanie, when we left off, yeah, you had already read Andrea's comment into the record, yes?
yes, that is correct.
Okay. Shucks, I'm trying to recall what point we left off and what we were discussing at the time.
Certainly. So as we concluded, Tim had asked me to read from the 1995 preamble about the
Yes.
definition of
Yes.
Also, during the break, we received an additional comment from Amy Carbaugh, providing the University of Illinois definition of human remains that may be of benefit to the committee. Amy says, if it's helpful as an example, the University of Illinois NAGPRA office procedures define human remains as, quote, the physical remains of the body of a person of Native American, Native Hawaiian, or Alaska Native ancestry, including all substances derived from such remains. This includes, but is not limited to, biological samples taken for DNA extraction, radiocarbon dating, stable isotope analysis, and any derivatives thereof. Beings are also included in the procedures definition, and then she provided a link.
Thank you. There are comments, members? I cannot see.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I really like that definition. I think it's really helpful. And I think we kind of have two paths forward. So we could either amend the full definition to specifically include DNA, or we could add a third bullet point that simply clarifies whatever the preference is of the committee.
Yeah, really. Other comments. I really like what Amy Carbaugh is suggesting here. Are there any other comments, members?
I like that quote as well. Specifically, and any derivatives thereof, because then it covers any future testing we don't know about or anything that we may have overlooked.
Mr. Chair, this is Shelby.
Yes, Shelby.
I wonder if under that definition we've already worked on with casts and 3D scans and so on, if there's room there to incorporate some of this language as well.
Actually,
or do you think it's
you know,
kind of a separate?
I was treating them as separate.
Okay.
with this new definition that she's suggesting, being the opening of the definition of human remains and the language that we were working on previously to then follow, because it kind of, the definition she's providing now really sets a firm foundation for the later language.
Mhm.
Let me see if I can stick it in there just for people to see. And this time I'll remember to click return. So getting back to, I'm sorry, is this Amy or Amy? I think this is a very good definition for us to be looking at. The only thing is that, yeah, it doesn't, we would still want to add the language, which was the basis of Angela's comments, and includes firmly interred animal remains. I don't think that is necessarily clear in this definition. But I think we're getting like different parts that are very useful in getting us to where we want to go. Members, what do you folks think? Yes, Tim.
I would propose that we parse it out into segments and
Yeah.
focus one after the other. The current definition says human remains means the physical remains of a body of a person of a Native American individual. That's the current definition. Is that what we want? There's going to be other things we add to it to elaborate on it, but is that part on its just right there, is that okay? Or do we need to change that too?
I like it mainly because of simplicity and because it makes very clear up front the distinction that Angela is bringing forward to us, and other tribes are bringing forward to us about recognizing burials where the remains are not human, but are imbued with with the character of Native Americans. I think that's critical. And for me, that should be the first thought, because I think what we're doing is developing a progression. And for me, that would be the starting point.
Because I
And then
do
I would-
recall back when the committee developed that recommendation, because they were the ones that were doing the yeoman work on elaborating on that. The proposed rule actually had a lot more detail in it. And as Melanie outlined in the preamble, there were a lot of objections to some of the details that were included. So the committee at that time recognized that having less made it broader, that narrowing the definition and making it simple made it cover more things. Because there's always a risk of the more you name, there's a likelihood that you forgot something.
Right, and that gets excluded.
So clearly, human remains means the physical remains of a body of a Native American individual. That, as Melanie, I think, articulated in what the program is telling people, I think that includes DNA. It already does. Now, some people may not recognize that, which we can elaborate on it, but I think that's already covered here. The intent back in '95 was that would be covered.
I would recommend that the opening statement, that human remains means the physical remains of the body of a Native American individual and includes firmly interred animal burials, spiritually imbued with the character of Native Americans, be then followed by I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing this name, Amy Carbo's statement, the physical remains of the body of a person of a Native American, because then she starts to be more specific about defining the inclusion of DNA. And then if you take the language that I rewrote of this section that we were originally discussing, it then includes those references to casts, 3D scans, aDNA taken from Native American individuals, digital genome sequences that were created using these DNA samples, and all other forms of digital data. And I reworded it so that it says that these are, as part of consultation, these issues must be disclosed, so that the tribe and Native Hawaiian organization, because oftentimes if you don't ask the right questions, they're not going to volunteer those answers. Like, I never knew to ask them, did you make casts of our ancestors? It never dawned on us, but now we know. And so that's my recommended progression of our comments here. Members?
Mr. Chair, this is Angela.
Yes, Angela. Yeah.
I would recommend adding, after adding the extracted DNA after human remains, human skeletal remains, because they're organic samples. So I would like to ensure that we're including both organic and inorganic. So the samples themselves plus the data that derived from it.
Where are you in the definition? Sorry.
Right after human remains, see where we're talking about 3D scans,
Oh,
that kind of thing. But after 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 5, 6 lines down where we're talking about American human skeletal remains, as well as any samples taken.
yeah, finding you. You're reading the language I just posted.
No,
On the
I'm
chat,
not.
or-
I'm
Okay.
on the document. Sorry.
Oh,
But we need
Mis-
to include samples in that, the
Mr.
organic.
Chair, are you replacing the language that is in the document?
yes.
You're
That's my
proposing to
suggestion.
replace what you already put with what
Correct.
is now in the chat.
Okay.
Correct. I mean, if you like, I can post it all together so you can see that there's a flow to it. Would that be helpful?
I would
Um,
just ask that the word organic samples be included
Oh,
in.
Let's see if I can share my screen, because I think I've dumped all that text there.
okay.
Is it up there?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the first sentence, right?
Mhm.
And the red is Angela's addition. The second piece we've got here is from Illinois. If I might recommend, just in order to keep the way the regulations deal with terms in a consistent way, that we would say a person of Native American ancestry and not include these, because we've not used those elsewhere, and they mean everything. They cover the gamut.
Yes,
I understand why they put those here, but in terms of having the regulations be done in a consistent way, my recommendation is to just stick with Native American, particularly since it's a statutory term. Is that reasonable?
I believe so. Members?
Yes.
I agree.
I agree as well. Thank you.
So continuing on, including all substances derived from such remains. Um, I'm reluctant to have two includings together, but I think we could probably join these two sentences.
Hmm.
Awesome, Tim.
Does that sound reasonable?
It does.
I think, Mr. Chair,
Yes, go ahead. Sorry.
I think that biological samples needs to include any medical samples because we've had casts taken for dental morphology and that sort of thing. So, right, to include medical samples.
How is that sentence?
That looks good.
I think I would probably drop that clause since this is in the regulations. We know what the inventory process is.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Armin.
Tim, in going back, it says human remains means the physical remains of a body of a Native American individual. From experience, Tim, we've had portions and even parts of a physical body of a Native American individual. And then also it says, and includes formally interred. If you could just strike that word formally and just say interred.
I think, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
if we take out formally interred, then they might state that we're looking at animals that were, say that include butcher marks for being eaten, that kind of thing, when we're not.
Yeah, I hear the concern. That's why I put in formally to make that distinction, because I'm trying to, look at both sides of this transaction, not just from the claimant side, but the museum side. And that's why I tend to want to keep the word formally to make sure that we're targeting animal burials that this was intentionally done.
Maybe intentionally, no, it would still have to be formally.
Mr. Chair, this is Shelby. I'm wondering to address the concern that Armand just expressed in terms of, it may, the physical remains may not be a whole body, that maybe we say something like human remains means any physical remains of the body. of a Native American. I think that might
Yeah,
incorporate, you know, if you don't have a whole ancestor, but it might be teeth or something like that as well. Maybe it's any physical.
I completely support that.
I do too.
Mr.
Oh, that
Chairman,
looks good.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Simon?
I would agree with that. But again, it says includes formally interred. And we've had inadvertent discoveries here in the Northwest that could not be determined to be formally interred. And we have had burials here in this area that could be associated with animal remains. That's from experience, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I'll defer that on that to Angela, because that's really her input on this. You know, I can just say the only reason I put that in is to make the distinction that, you know, for us, when you do that kind of a ceremonial process to imbue
Maybe
a non-human being with human essence, that is intentional. That is
Right.
not, that's not for just anyone or any animal. It's pretty formal. So that's why I included it, to make the distinction that it's not automatic. It doesn't include all animals. But that was my thinking, but this is not my
maybe
my
what
issue. Yeah.
we can change formally to ceremonially interred, because we want to ensure that they recognize that they've received specific funerary rites.
I like that.
We can
I mean, does that work?
take out formally, because I understand if they're out of context, then they might not allow for burial, because we do get a lot of people, not a lot of people, but we have had people stand on that specific word in consultation. So I'm fine with excluding formally and replacing it with ceremonially.
I like ceremony better, actually. I think that's a great suggestion.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Simon?
again, Mr. Chairman, from experience, what we've done here and what we've seen and what we've experienced is that more than likely associated or unassociated animal remains we determined in consultation that they were associated with the burial, whether it be ceremonial, what have you. That's what we don't know, but we assume that because of what we do today. So there needs to be language that doesn't confuse what we're trying to say. We know what we want to say, and we know from experience what we've done. But this language needs to strengthen what we continue to do with our ancestral remains. So I agree, again, striking that word formally But again, any determination that we make, we do it in consultation. So those comments again, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you. I agree. I think this first sentence is much tighter now, and any other observations, comments? Can we go to the second? Oh, go ahead, Angela, sorry.
Where we talk about disclosure. I'm not sure. I don't think would be included in this particular segment, but one thing that is not disclosed at this time on, regularly is that museums historically destroyed human remains when they were no longer in exhibit quality. And we found this out when we went to the Smithsonian, that several sets of remains were discarded because they were no longer, they had chips, they were discoloring, there were issues with them decaying over time. So, and then in asking other museums about this, it apparently was a practice. So I'm not sure if we could put that in right now, but it's something that we would like to know.
I would see that more of as an explanatory comment, because we're trying to fashion a definition of human remains that are actually in possession of museums. So
Mr. Chair,
yes,
I believe I've added language specifically addressing Angela's concern at a later point regarding the inventory.
Okay.
All right, so the second sentence, does anyone have any comments on it? The one that begins, the physical remains of the body of a person. Okay, having heard none, on to the next part. Now I'm wondering whether this is even appropriate to be here. Just somewhere else as part of the inventory process, the consultation process, rather than as part of the definition of human remains. I'm starting to, because I really like the first two sentences in terms of addressing the issue of what is human remains, or what are human remains. And whether the following language is better placed in the inventory process, the consultation during inventory process.
Mr. Chair, I support that change.
It just makes sense that the first two sentences should, because anyway, I think I've belabored the point that we're just trying to define what human remains are here.
So would that be deleting this section?
It would be deleting it from being placed under the definition of human remains and inserted instead in the section on consultation during the inventory process.
And I think you've saved this in the chat, so we can cut and paste and put it back in from the chat.
Yeah. Because then it makes sense that we're just trying to define human remains, and really the language I had in there is a consultation related issue. So yeah, if we could take the rest of it out.
This one too?
Yeah, because we're just, I would keep all of that language together. Yep, take out that as well. And the last sentence. There we go.
And then this section gets to a different thing, which is the exemptions,
Yes,
which is a different thought, I think.
yes.
So are we okay with this definition?
Mr. Chair, there is a comment
Yes.
in the chat.
Oh, I don't see it.
About adding cremations to the definition.
I think that's addressed with Shelby's comment using the word any.
Okay.
I think that's the because it would include cremation.
I wanted to make sure that we looked at the chat comments.
Melanie, could you please read into the record Raylan, like shucks, Raylan Butler comment.
Raylan Butler states, can you add something about cremation? Human remains means a physical or cremated remains of the body of a Native American individual and includes ceremonial interred animal burial, spiritually, and well, it's the rest of the definition. She's suggesting adding physical or cremated remains.
Members? So in my mind, even cremated remains are still physical, so that's why I think it's Shelby's suggestion would cover that, but
Mr. Chairman, yeah, I think
Official.
any physical remains would cover cremations and any other type of burial practice that is carried out, because there are different types of burial practices, and I think trying to address all of them in a definition would be almost impossible. So I think the way it's stated now would cover cremations as well as any other types of burial practices.
yeah, I concur. Members, everyone comfortable with that?
For the record, I just tinkered with that including to mean includes to make it read a little better.
Okay.
So
And then
this-
that paragraph comes out.
which one?
The one that starts with in addition. Oh, wait. I'm sorry, I'm struggling. I don't know how to deal with the CAS issue. Is that a consultation issue? Or is that part of the definition of human remains?
If we're adding it, it's definitely part of the definition of human remains.
Okay.
If I might, there's
Yes, Melanie.
the recommendations that you have here, while specific regulatory language is helpful, we can also use the textual comment that you have here about CAS and 3Ds as a part of our consideration. I wouldn't want the committee to feel like it has to deliberate on specific regulatory language when what we are looking for are your general recommendations. So
Okay.
in the interest of time, I would suggest that you leave this as is. And if, we can take this as your recommendations on what should be changed related to the definition here.
Yeah, I tend to agree because we got 2 hours and lots more to go through. I'm really feeling good about this definition of human remains in terms of properly expanding it, and want to thank those who have called in to comment on this to help us develop this a more functional definition. Thank you.
Are we moving on?
I think so. Yes.
Can I shut off the share because it's going to confuse us in terms of page numbering?
Okay. And back to the original draft. Yeah.
If we could.
Yes. I think we're now on page 6.
Mr. Chair.
Comments on that?
Oh, I do. So for 10.2, I just want to address that first sentence where it says the committee makes recommendations for the inclusion, because it sounds like that's the recommendation that we're making when the comment is the opposite of that. So could we just reword that first sentence?
I'm sorry, where are you, Dominique?
On 10.2, the definition of Native American, that first highlighted comment, I just wanted to clarify more the intent.
Could we change for the inclusion into regarding the inclusion?
Or maybe it had made those recommendations previously.
How would it read?
The committee made previous recommendations. I'd just like to be clear in my comments moving forward that that is a major concern.
Does the committee oppose the inclusion? I mean, if we're going to go to it, is that what we're, or is concerned about?
I think the latter.
I think we had discussed in our last session on keeping the language as it was written in some of the parts of the regs, and sort of going with those recommendations, and that's incorporated into these comments in future sections. So for example, a Indian group would use a federally recognized tribe. They would use that partnership relationship to make a claim.
Yeah, I think I understand what you're trying to get at. I can't quite figure out how to change the text.
Dominique, can you point to where in the Native American definition this concern is raised? Because I think there's a confusion here between the definition of Native American versus the definition of Indian tribe.
Let me take a look real quick.
Right. I see what you're saying. Native American is anybody, but Indian tribes have to be federally recognized.
Yes.
And that's a jurisdictional overstep.
My comment may have been specifically to another person's comment, so it might have been mixed up and lost a little bit in translation, and I just wanted to make sure that it was captured. So if it's not clear, we can remove it, but I did just want to make sure that that comment was clear and on the record.
If
I
I
think-
might make a suggestion again, in the vein of a general recommendation to the secretary on this, might be to consider Tim's suggestion that this sentence read, the committee does not recommend the inclusion of Indian groups that are not federally recognized or is concerned about the inclusion, to make it clear what it is the committee is concerned about.
Yes,
Or what you're recommending. Are you recommending the secretary include non-federally recognized groups, or are you recommending the secretary not include non-federally recognized groups?
correct. The latter.
Correct.
I think we should spell out that lineal descendants do not need to be within a recognized tribe, if that's what we're going to say explicitly.
So stating the committee does not recommend the inclusion of Indian groups that are not federally recognized. This is, and this is not concerning, this is based. Oh, shucks. I see what you mean. Because you're talking about Native American. Oh.
That's okay. I would even suggest you could, this is because the act clearly defines Indian tribes as, and then granting, the rest of the comments fine. It's really just the first sentence that I would suggest the committee agree if they do on what they're saying about the inclusion of non-federally recognized groups.
And I guess I'd recommend is concerned with, because later there is a provision that I think you had recommended, Dominique, that the current rule would basically allow museums and non-federally recognized groups, after they've done consultation, to agree to go ahead without any oversight from the department. And I think you had proposed that those would in fact be reviewed by this committee and by the secretary. So I don't think we can say no, that we're against it, if later we have a provision to allow it under restricted circumstances.
Right. I think also we're looking at NAGPRA as a human rights law rather than a Native American specific law, because we can't exclude those lineal descendants, or
So proper proposed language might be the committee is concerned with the recommendation to include Indian groups that are not federally recognized, as the act clearly defines an Indian tribe as.
I think that works for me.
Read it one more time.
What was that, Tim?
Could you read it one more time? I'm trying to write it down.
Yeah, the committee is concerned with the recommendation to include Indian groups that are not federally recognized,
Okay,
comma,
I got it.
yeah, as the, and then take out this is concerning. I mean, it is concerning, but you don't have to say it twice.
Got it.
Okay, how are we with the rewritten language? I think it captures Dominique's concern.
I'm fine with it. This is Shelby.
Armin,
I
Angela?
agree.
I agree.
Thank you. So 10.2 Native Hawaiian Organization. Oh, I'm sorry. Back to you, Tim.
So the rest of page 6. Page 7. Page 8.
I just had a couple of minor text edits here. Under 10.2,
Which 10.2, just to be clear?
oh, possession or control.
Okay.
So towards the middle, says requiring museums and federal agencies to provide information on all cultural items that they either possession. It just needs to be worked out there. I think it should say that they have in their possession.
Got it.
And then the second to last sentence in that paragraph, we request that revise the regulation.
Just change that to 2.
Or that the department.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you, Dominic.
Page 9. Ken.
Mm-hmm.
11.
I would like to, I have a question.
Yes, please.
When we mentioned 30 days, in some places it's, you know, are we talking about 30 days, calendar days? Because that's what I see here is 30 days is 1 month. But if we're talking office days, that's 20 days.
I think days are defined elsewhere in the regs.
Right.
Is that business days throughout? I can't remember.
It is supposed to be business days throughout, but this is 30 days. So is that?
If I might, in this instance where we're talking about a calculated date from the Federal Register, it would be 30 calendar days or days as the Federal Register calculates them.
That's what I thought.
So this is not the same as a deadline where those are business days, deadlines and timelines for museum action. This is a separate calculation done by the Federal Register.
Okay.
I suggest that we include calendar days, 30 calendar days versus.
Actually, in this kind of language, you just leave it as is because in the published version, it will be a date certain. It won't even say the Federal Register will include that date.
Okay.
This is just instructing the Federal Register how many days.
I see.
Okay.
And this would equate to the effective date of the final rule.
Okay.
Anything else on 11?
Yep.
12. $13.
Just had a typo under 10.5C, comma 10.6A, first, second, third paragraph, second sentence where it says Wailupe, Oahu, if you could just insert an Okina between the O and the A.
Third paragraph, which sentence or which line?
Second line, where it says what at the caves in Wailupe, comma, Oahu.
What do you need here?
in Okina, you know, upside down apostrophe mark between the O and the A.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else on 13?
We're officially halfway there.
14?
Mm-mm.
15? $16? 17? 18? 19? 20?
Okay, there it is.
I actually have one here. On
On page 20, Tim?
page 20,
Yep.
a little over halfway down. There's one that says 10.10K1IB. And then there's another one that I actually have to go back and check what the formatting of this should be, whether this is indented or not. But in that one that reads 10.10K, the museum or federal agency must ensure it has initiated consultation under paragraph B of this section, if any, or seek a consensus. I would recommend to change the or to and.
Okay,
Seek a consensus recommendation from the review committee and concurrence from the secretary under subpart B of this section. And that, I think, provides the oversight that Dominique was concerned about.
right. Mhm.
Dominique, your thoughts? I would tend to agree with Tim.
Yes, I agree with him. Good catch.
And just, can you recall, Dominique, if this paragraph that starts 10.10K, the museum, is that regulatory text you're proposing?
Think it is.
If so, I would indent it and highlight it and stuff.
I believe it is, yes.
Okay,
That's why I put it in bold.
I'll change the colors.
And same with the paragraph below.
The paragraph below is also regulatory text.
I believe so.
Okay,
Can
I'll
I
check and see
Can I
how it
ask a
fits.
clarifying question here? Do you only intend to have the recommendation from the review committee apply when transfers to an Indian group? Because there are also options to reinsure as well as to transfer to a federally recognized Indian tribe under 1010K. So there are three ways that a proposed transfer might occur. Do you only intend to apply this to the third one of a non-federally recognized group or to all three?
My understanding is that the issue was the lack of oversight with non-federally recognized groups, and that this allows a way for those groups to have some sort of oversight. And I think we were uncomfortable with museums themselves making that determination on whether that group, you know, had legitimacy or not. And so this provides some sort of oversight there.
Okay, then I would actually suggest that you not include the bolded part in the first 1010K because that's going to apply to all three options. Reinternment, transfer to a federal tribe, or transfer to a non-federally recognized group. Rather, what you have in the last paragraph there is would only apply to that transfer to a non federally recognized group.
Can we delete the first one? Dominique?
I think so, then yes.
And that gets rid of the or issue.
Great.
Mhm.
Anything else on 20? Uh, 21? $22? 23? 24? 25?
Hmm.
So Melanie, in terms of process, proposed regulations discussion is 2. Public comment and written comments is 4. I'm not sure if this at this juncture is where we approve our comments, or should we wait until we take in public comments, which may impact our views on the language that we have now.
Certainly, we could proceed that way. I think we can accommodate that within the time that you have remaining. Just to move on to agenda item 3, upcoming meeting locations. During the January 5th.
Wait, hold on. I'm sorry, just a minute. Tim, is that agreeable that we do that? Hold off on our final approval, because as we were going, we were making the changes now, so it's not like we have to circle back. But I just want to, before we approve it, we take in the public comments, because I mean, it's look how well it impacted how we made our initial comments on some of these challenging issues. So you good with that?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Sorry. Go ahead. Oh, Shelby, were you going to say something?
No, I was gonna say, I think this is a good idea to wait until we can hear people's comments if they have some.
Mr. Chairman,
Aaron? Yes, sir.
Melanie, is there a deadline or time frame for public comment?
Yes, sir.
31st.
Public comment must be submitted by January 31st. However, the committee's comments need to be finalized today.
Yes.
Okay. Well, Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion then that we agree on our comments, since this is a deadline today.
Yes. I mean, I was just saying that I asked that we hold off on doing that until we take the public comment, and then before we close the meeting, we then entertain that motion. And
Okay.
I'm intrigued by the comments that we received so far, and I'm looking forward to more before we approve our comments.
Okay, I'll table.
All right, thank you. Melanie, please.
So the third item on your agenda is the discussion of upcoming meeting locations. During the January 5th meeting, the review committee received an invitation from Indiana University and the Miami Tribe of Oklahoma to meet in Bloomington, Indiana. In addition, the committee discussed other possible meeting locations, including Berkeley, California, and the Southwest. Does the review committee have any additional comments on a location for your next in-person meeting?
Members? I had made the comment that to consider Harvard University as one of the venues for future meetings, definitely not the next one. But for future meetings, given the concerns at least reported in the media about the additional remains that they have of Native Americans that they didn't initially report, which I'm very troubled by. So at some point, if we could give Cambridge, Massachusetts also consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Armin.
would again, I guess restate what was stated at the last meeting, our 83rd meeting. It's always a benefit for the committee to meet on a reservation or near a reservation. And it was suggested again that consideration for Oklahoma and the Southwest. Thank you.
Thank you, Armin. Melanie, for purposes of the discussion, are we supposed to come up with like specifics, or we're just trying to recognize all of the various choices?
Yep, I wanted to give you another opportunity to discuss this if necessary, but based on the locations that you've identified, what we will do now is identify potential venues that can accommodate the needs of the committee by space and audiovisual technology, as well as try to identify possible dates for one meeting, which we are looking now at late spring or early summer, so May, June. And also then a second meeting sometime in October or November. So for the committee, look for emails from Lisa on specific dates and venues, but that's where we will go from now.
Any other comments on this matter?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Armin?
I'll make a motion that our next meeting be in May in person, place to be determined.
I would just ask for the flexibility of June, especially with some of these being universities. The timing in May may be a bit difficult. That's why I've suggested we look into June as well.
Armin? So Armin moved to have our next in-person meeting in May, and Melanie asked that we expand that to also include June. Armin, are you willing to amend your motion?
Yes.
All right, is there a second?
Mr.
Second.
Chairman, I will second it. Oops. Okay, Angela.
The discussion? Having heard none, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
All right, thank you.
Great, thank you. The fourth item on the agenda and the last item before we return to your recommendations on the regulations is public comment. Every meeting of the review committee includes time for public comment as required under FACA. If you are interested in providing public comment during this meeting, you can raise your hand using the reactions button, or you can send a chat to make a public comment. The review committee can also accept written comment, although if you were going to submit written comment, we would have needed it before this meeting to be able to consider it at this meeting. However, written comment is always welcome and can be considered at future review committee meetings. I would like to say that we received several comments during your discussion, especially on the definition of human remains, which we read into the record. I would like to add that there was one additional comment that we did not read into the record from Tina Osceola, stating that the Seminole Tribe of Florida does not support including non-federally recognized tribes. So during that discussion, we received that public comment. If you have public comment, you may raise your hand. Again, the committee is particularly interested in hearing on repatriation issues in general, but at this time, specifically on some of the items that have been discussed in their recommendations on the proposed regulations. So if you have input you would like to provide to the committee, you may raise your hand or put your name in the chat.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Armin.
would very much like to encourage the 62, 63 participants. Please speak up. We need to hear from you. We're all in this together, and the more the merrier. But I would encourage those participants, please speak up, give us hell, whatever you want to do. But we're all in this together. So just that, Mr. Chairman, that's all.
Thank you, Armin.
Hey, we have a hand raised from Tina Osceola. Tina, you may unmute and speak.
Yeah, hi committee. I have a couple of, can you hear me? Okay, I have just a couple of questions. One of them has to do with the plan of actions, the plan of action that will be required for just any excavation. The specific question that I have about that would be for tribes like ourselves. We have a cultural resource ordinance under 101D5. And so our on-reservation permitting, the way I'm reading this would mean that this would apply to tribes like our own, or any tribe that has its own permitting process, that you would have to have a NAGPRA plan of action for every single excavation. Is that how I'm reading that? Is that correct?
If I might.
Sure, Melanie.
Tina, the plan of action is specifically for federal lands in the United States and tribal lands in Hawaii. So it would not pertain to tribal lands such as what you're describing. So if you're discussing lands that are within the exterior boundaries of your reservation, then the plan of action would not apply.
That's good. That makes me feel a little bit better. I'm just wondering if at any point in time in the future, it could get confusing to others, and that would create a loophole for tribal lands to be included in the definition of federal lands.
No, under NAGPRA, there's a very distinct definition of tribal lands being within the exterior boundaries of a reservation.
Okay.
There be certain requirements for, in your case, the Seminole Tribe of Florida. When there is a discovery, the tribe would have to respond to that discovery. If there were to be an excavation, the tribe would have to authorize that excavation. And lastly, if there were a lineal descendant identified, then the tribe would have to complete the disposition to the lineal descendant. So there are some requirements, but the plan of action is not a requirement for tribal land.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to make a comment? There's a comment in the chat that I will read for the record from Aaron Guthrie. No substantive comment, just wanted to say I appreciate the care and attention given to the details of language in the regulations and how that discussion is always focused on the best way to put the spirit of the law into action. Is there anyone else who would like to come forward with a public comment or a question? I'd like to take this opportunity to remind all of you in attendance that there is a final public listening session on the proposed regulations this Friday, January 13th. You can find information on the NAGPRA events page for joining that public listening session. If you have additional comments or input, that is an opportunity to come forward to the Department of the Interior. Mr. Chair, I do not see any other hands raised or comments in the chat.
All right, thank you. I would like for us to circle back to our final approval of our work on proposed comments to the regulations. Armand, you have a motion for us?
Again, to restate the motion, would like to make a motion on the comments that the committee has made on the proposed regulations.
And the motion is to approve?
Yes, comments on the committee has made on the proposed
Okay.
regulations.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Angela. Discussion?
Question?
Yes, Aaron.
No,
I would
Sorry, yeah, that always throws me off when you do that.
calling for the question.
Before that, I would just ask for a point of clarification.
Yeah.
My understanding that, Tim, you have the master copy of this document and you will be sending that to me to submit on the committee's behalf?
I think what I would prefer is that I will make all the revisions that we've talked about today. I will send it out to all the members. And that maybe we can authorize the chair to then pass it on to you. Is that fair?
That works. Melanie?
That's fine. Again, just keep in mind that you cannot make any substantive changes to the draft upon that review. Without deliberation in public, you would not be able to make any changes to the draft. However, certainly minor changes and editorial changes are certainly yes, can certainly be made. Can you establish some kind of time frame for that? Just so I have a awareness of when to expect the final recommendation.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Simon.
So Melanie, so the comments that we made on the regulations, so the final approval, is it going to be similar to what we approved, the report to Congress?
You mean in terms of what happens next?
Yes, next steps.
No, it will be different. I will take the recommendations and then submit them to the department, to the secretary, to the assistant secretaries as a part of the record for the regulations. So those comments will all be reviewed, responded to, and be a part of the final rulemaking process. I do need to check whether or not your comments will be uploaded into regulations.gov. That may be possible too. But because these are not sent outside of the department, they are, this is a document that you are sending to the department for its consideration and review. There's no additional process involved. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. So again, Melanie, how long will all of this take?
Well, we project that we hope to have a final rule published by the end of the calendar year, December 2023. That will depend in large part on the number of comments and the quantity and quality of those comments, how quickly we're able to review them and prepare a final rule.
So this century.
This year is my hope.
Okay, thank you.
So Tim, do you have an estimate for when you might be able to share a final draft with the committee?
7 o'clock.
7 o'clock Eastern. Okay.
7 o'clock Eastern.
Right. And then
I've made all the changes as we were going along. I just want to make sure I got them all.
okay. And then Mr. Chair, I'd look to you to set a deadline for the members to respond.
8 o'clock Eastern? No, seriously, if we could get your comments into Tim or just the fact that you reviewed it and you didn't see any minor edits. Again, it's minor edits only, nothing substantive at this point. Please get them in at ASAP.
Maybe send your email with a vote button.
Well, I will need to clarify. You've already
Oh,
voted,
not-
or you're
oh,
about to vote. Right.
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
final-
we got to vote on the record.
Right.
Right.
We've already voted.
I meant-
Actually,
I
Or
meant
no, we haven't
from,
yet. We
uh,
haven't yet.
Oh,
I
no.
haven't yet,
But
I
we're
was-
about ready to.
I was just meaning in the email to say you reviewed it.
Okay, are we prepared to take the vote? Is there any more discussion? Shelby, you look like you have some thoughts.
Yeah, I was going to suggest a specific day and time, like end of business tomorrow or something, or by, to give us a 24-hour turnaround or something. I'm just get
I
concerned
like that.
we can get really busy with other things and things start to slide. And maybe it's by 7 o'clock Eastern time tomorrow. And
Yes, I would concur.
Would that be okay?
So by 7 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow, please get your final comments or edits in.
And do those go to you, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so
Okay.
the motion that was made is to approve the document containing the review committee's recommendations on the proposed regulations with minor edits to be provided after this meeting. I think that the easiest way to proceed is for me to call a voice vote if that is okay, Mr. Chair.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, I will start with the order on my screen. You can respond by saying yes or no if you approve the draft, yes, and if you don't, no. Armand Menthorn,
Yes.
Dominique de Beaubien,
Yes.
Shelby Tisdale,
Yes,
Timothy McEwen,
Yes,
Holly Aloha Ayau,
Yes.
Angela Garcia Lewis.
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries and the recommendations are approved.
I have one question, Melanie, if I might. I think you had said something about that when the committee provides you with the recommendations, you were going to see whether it would be uploaded into the docket. I actually think it would be useful to have this posted in the docket. Would it be easier if we authorize the chair to just submit them to the docket?
No, what I meant and what I need to figure out is whether it becomes a part of the docket documents or if it becomes a comment. I need to work with my regulations office to figure out what they recommend where we post it. There's two places. The review committee's previous recommendations on the regulations is in the documents of the docket as opposed to a comment. So I will seek guidance on where to post it. But it will be posted as a part of these regulatory changes, and certainly it'll be a part of the permanent record of the review committee.
I guess my concern is I would prefer if this document is available on regulations.gov so that other people can see it,
Yes, and
and
what,
sooner rather than later.
right, there's two places it can go, and I just need to figure out which place is appropriate. That's all.
Fair enough.
Okay, and I will do that immediately. I will do that by 7 o'clock tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay. Unless there are any further issues that the committee would like to raise, we can move into the closing of this meeting.
All right. Any final comments before I close us with Hule with prayer?
Thank you,
Anyone?
everyone.
yes. Thank you,
Tim?
everyone. Oh, and Tim's got a comment. Thank you.
I just wanted to thank everybody for all the hard work that you've done on reviewing boring documents and tedious work to try to get this pushed ahead, not just the comments on the rule, but the report to Congress as well. Thank you all.
And thank you, Tim, for all of your hard work in compiling all of our comments and getting us to this point. Thank you.
And I would like to extend the thanks of myself as well as the Department of the Interior and the Secretary of the Interior to the review committee for its work on making these recommendations on the proposed regulations. I would also like to thank the staff of the Department of the Interior that have assisted me with this. I may be the face of this, but you all know there's many more that are supporting me. And lastly, I would also like to extend my thanks to the attendees of the meeting for those of you who participated, but also those of you who listened. It is important that we have your attendance and your participation in these meetings. I would also like to note that Holly Aloha has offered to close this session with a traditional pule. It is again a tradition for immediately after the pule that I will end the meeting. So I just wanted everyone to know that is how I will proceed as soon as Holly Aloha finishes the pule. The meeting will be ended for everyone. I also take this opportunity to stop the recording as well as the transcript. So if it's okay with you, Mr. Chair, I'll adjourn the meeting.
Yes.
Okay,